Hello, Middle Earth Wanderers. I'm doing something a little different today. I'm interviewing Tolkien expert and best selling fantasy author Paul Genesse. I'd like to hear your feedback on this episode. You can drop me a note on Twitter or Instagram, or send me an email using the link in the show notes. Welcome! In the Lord of the Rings podcast, we wander the world of J.R.R. Tolkien by exploring the foundational epic stories from the deep past of Middle Earth. If you enjoyed Tolkien's books, or maybe Peter Jackson's movies, or perhaps you're excited for Amazon Studios' new series, The Rings of Power, and you want to dive deeper into the rich world of Middle Earth, then listen and subscribe. Magovanyan, fellow wanderers. Welcome back, Middle Earth Wanderers, to the Lore of the Rings podcast. We have a special treat for you today. I'm here with Paul Genesse, who is a #1 Amazon best-selling author of Sakura, Intellectual Property, and the best-selling Iron Dragon series, including The Golden Cord, The Dragon Hunters, and The Secret Empire. He has also sold almost 20 short stories and is the writer, director, and producer of the Star Wars rock opera and steampunk rock opera, as well as Han and Kira, a Star Wars story. Wow, those sound like exciting stories. He created and is the editor of the 5 volumes in the Shared Multiverse Crimson Pact anthology series, featuring over 500,000 words and several New York Times best-selling authors. Paul, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be on.
Tell us your Middle Earth journey. What was your introduction to J.R.R. Tolkien?
Apparently, I was 4 years old, and my mom's significant other, he loved like The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, and for whatever reason, I ended up with a little tiny yellow T-shirt with green felt letters on it that said Lil Bilbo, and I was 4, and I was this tiny little kid, and I just grew up hearing about Middle Earth and Lord of the Rings, and it was years before I could read it, but I watched the cartoon as like a 5-year-old and was terrified when the orcs came on and I had to hide under the couch cushion pillows.
Is that like the 1970s cartoon?
The
Yes,
Rankin Bass.
I think we were all terrified of
Mhm.
that cartoon. Yep.
Hey, I liked it as a little kid. I still think there's cool stuff with it. I have it on vinyl. I have like the record of it.
Oh, wow.
And the Greatest Adventure song, whenever I go on a long trip, the
hmm
the tradition is to like play and sing the Greatest Adventure song from that as we leave on the long trip. So I'm like
Yeah,
an
absolutely.
uber nerd. Eventually read Lord of the Rings, Hobbit. So I read the Hobbit like back to back to back like 3 times in 4th grade, and then eventually got into Lord of the Rings and just became this like Tolkien nerd. Read all of the ancillary stuff. I didn't read it all then. I've kind of read it as my life has progressed. But I'm just like a super Tolkien fan, and I love Middle Earth, and I love learning all about the lore. And I'm like the Tolkien Middle Earth Utah guy. Like they always have me moderate the panels, do the panels.
hmm
I do presentations on Tolkien and Lord of the Rings, the movies. I've interviewed some of the actors, like Sean Astin, who played Sam in the original trilogy.
Oh,
Met
yes,
a
yes.
bunch of the dwarves. I interviewed John Rhys Davies, who played Gimli, and I did
Oh,
a famous
wonderful.
interview with John Rhys Davies and his son Gloin, or sorry,
Wow.
his father. Excuse me,
Right,
Gloin is Gimli's
right.
father. And then we did like a hilarious little skit where it was like old Gloin telling Gimli that he can't go on the adventure to the Lonely Mountain because Gimli was only 65 and he
Right.
couldn't go. He was too young. So anyway, that I'm just like a huge nerd and I love Lord of the Rings. And thanks for letting me come on your podcast and talk about the Rings of Power show. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. We're gonna talk about Rings of Power here in just a second, but before we move off of Tolkien specifically, it was actually one of your panels where I met you and heard you and thought to myself, I need to get this guy on my podcast. Just the way you articulated things, just loved it. In fact, one of the things you said in your panel at FanX in Salt Lake City, you were talking about Galadriel, and you said something to the effect of, and I'm going to paraphrase you here, but you said something to the effect of that you were both humbled and horrified by Tolkien as an author, just his ability to create characters on the spot and that sort of thing. Could you tell us a little bit about what humbles you about Tolkien's writing, and then why does he horrify you?
Yeah, so right before this is, FanX 2022. So we've only seen the first 5 episodes of the Rings of Power show. And right before you heard me and met me, I did a presentation. Actually, no, did you see you saw the presentation on Galadriel or
I
no?
did. Yes.
Yeah, you did. That's
Yep.
right. That's
Yep.
we walked over together. Okay.
hmm
So I did this presentation on the Lady Galadriel, and as I was researching her, she's one of my favorite characters. I just love her so much. I learned that Tolkien had no idea that she was a thing, that she was a character. He did not know of her until right before he wrote her. So he's writing the Moria chapters, the Bridge of Khazad-dûm, fly, you fools. He's writing them coming down the mountain afterward. It's super sad. You remember the movies, if you haven't read the books, super
Right.
sad.
hmm
Gandalf dies. Sorry,
hmm
spoiler alert.
Yep.
And it's actually quite a bit of writing there between they leave Moria and they get to Lothlorien. We have never even heard her name in the Lord of the Rings movies or the book at that point. He has not written the name Galadriel in Lord of the Rings until right before we meet her. So here we go. They show up in Lothlorien, and he's like, "Oh, I should like the Lord and Lady of Lothlorien. He's a pantser. He invented it on the spot."
Right.
And he didn't have that name Galadriel. He had a different name,
hmm
Artanis and Ryan. Anyway, I can't remember.
Nerwin was one. Yeah.
You had no idea. So then Galadriel shows up and he's just totally winging it. And then
hmm
he creates this amazing character. So I'm horrified that he had no pre-planning on this. But I'm
hmm
humbled that he could create this amazing character spur of the moment. And at that moment, he realized, well, he didn't realize at that moment. It took him a while. He figured out that Galadriel was one of the most important characters in Middle Earth and was Sauron's main rival in Middle Earth. It's
Yes.
Sauron versus Galadriel. That's the epic struggle that we see in The Lord of the Rings. And yet he wrote all of that and didn't even know she was a thing. And then he spent 25 years, the last 25 years of his life, retconning. So
Right.
retroaction, changes to canon, which we talked about.
Right.
Um, retconning her story and coming up with new versions of it. At first, she was a lowly like Sylvan elf, and then she eventually became a Noldor. And it was amazing to see what happened. And he loved Galadriel. He loved
Yes.
her. And I don't know.
Yes.
I'm so in awe that at pantsers, because I'm not a pantser. I plan things.
hmm
Anyway, thanks
Yeah.
for asking that.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's I think it was in Unfinished Tales, right, where Christopher Tolkien, J.R.R. son, said that there's no other story more complicated than Celeborn and Galadriel, and even there's a note that Tolkien was writing in the last month of his life. Again, retconning Galadriel, as you say. So
Yeah,
it's clear he struggled with her, but loved her at the same time, and couldn't couldn't quite grasp the importance of her character even up until the last month of his life. He just kind of kept working on that.
that's absolutely true. And she was banned from going back to heaven, the Elven lands, the Valinor, the Blessed Realm, where the elves go and kind of live forever. So she was banned from going back there. And remember, she resists the ring and says, I passed the test.
Right.
For thousands of years, literally 7,000 years, she's banned from going back to Valinor. But now she passes the test and the ban is lifted and she can go back. So Tolkien wrote that's canon, and then he walked it back for a while. Like there was no
hmm
ban, she just stayed to fight Sauron, and there was a ban, and there was no ban again. Anyway, I'm going to read the quote from Christopher Tolkien in
Yeah.
Unfinished Tales.
Please
It's
do.
fairly
Please.
short. It's just this. It's in the Unfinished Tales, Chapter 4, The History of Galadriel and Celeborn. There is no part of the history of Middle-earth more full of problems than the story of Galadriel and Celeborn. And it must be admitted that there are severe inconsistencies, quote, embedded in the traditions, end quote. Or to look at the matter from another point of view, that the role and importance of Galadriel only emerged slowly, and that her story underwent continual refashionings.
Continual refashionings. What an understatement, right?
Yeah.
So Galadriel is a complicated character, highly important. Tolkien struggled with her. She is now the central figure of the Rings of Power series. And as you said before, as of this recording, we've seen 5 episodes of the first season. of Rings of Power, her character has received a little bit of criticism, right? Almost as if she's too vengeful, she's too hateful, she's too impetuous, perhaps. I wonder what you think of Galadriel as she's portrayed in Rings of Power, and what you think the showrunners are doing with her story arc.
First, a couple like one disclosure. I met JD Payne, one of the showrunners. JD Payne and Patrick McKay are the two showrunners, and I got to hang out with
Right.
JD for a day at a convention in Provo, Utah, when he came to visit. His
Oh, that's
mother-in-law.
awesome.
His mother-in-law and I are friends. I think he's a great man. He's a great person, and him and Patrick, I think, are really really good people. So I agree in general with how they're portraying her because we've got 50 hours of story. My quibble with Galadriel, and I think that what they've done is it's pretty canon, really. Like there's a lot of canon there. They had to invent some
Hmm.
stuff, but I mean, she was like
Right.
that. Tolkien wrote that she was prideful, and you can see in the text that this is an interpretation that actually works. But where I quibble is that they made her just a teeny bit too unlikable in the first 5 episodes of the show.
Hmm.
She's for episode 4 or 4 and 5. There's a few more moments where she's more likable, but I think they went really far. And I wonder if as they were filming it, it's hard. I've been part of some film projects. It's hard to know when you're filming certain scenes. It's like, okay, this is your character, do this. You got to cut all that together later. And when you cut it all together later, it's like, wow, we went a little far, didn't we?
Mm.
She was
Hmm.
she was so rude and mean, and like every scene it's like the same almost.
Yeah.
She's just she's a little far. So I would have just made her just a teeny bit more likable. But here's the deal. We're 5 hours into 50 hours.
Yes.
Galadriel is going to live to be 8,000 years old, and she's
Right.
going to have a story arc. She's going to become the Galadriel we see in Fellowship of the Ring. It's going to be awesome. But right now, she's pissed off. And when I analyze what really went down with her character in canon, she's broken. She's incredibly broken.
Hmm.
She has 4 brothers. She has a family. She has friends. They all are gone or dead, and she's the only one left. So
Yeah.
I see her in the show as an incredibly traumatized, broken, rage-filled character that is not in her right mind. She's really not. And what a horrific moment, like time for her to be alive, because she knows that Sauron is coming back, and that things are going to become so bad. I mean, there's going to be
Yes.
another massive war. It's not over. And everybody around her is elf-splaining to her, Elrond, Gil-galad.
Right.
It's like their version of mansplaining.
Hmm.
Stupid Elrond is like so much younger than her. And he's like, but listen, this is how it is in the show. You
Yeah.
gotta
Put up your sword.
put up
Yeah.
your sword, do something. I mean, that's just so condescending. So,
Right.
but anyway, it's been for me. I love Gladriel. I love Morfydd Clark. I think she's great.
She
I
really
think
is. Yeah.
she's doing a great job. She's powerful. She's strong. But the director and the writers, I think, just went just a teeny bit too far, and we needed to see a couple of moments where we loved her, just a little
Just
something. We're like,
something. Yeah.
oh, you recognize that you're crazy right now.
Right.
Anyway,
Right.
there you go.
Yeah, I like that you say that she is sort of this broken and traumatized character, because and she kind of says that in what was that, the first or second episode, when she's talking with Elrond, and she says, you have not seen what I have seen. That line for me, when I saw that in the trailer, I was like, oh yeah, like nobody has seen what Galadriel's seen. She's seen all of her brothers die. One of them dies in the dungeons of Sauron, right? Defending Baron. Our listeners know that tale very well. She's seen all of the major battles of the first age. But even before that, she saw the light of the trees, and she saw the darkness afterwards, right? Like she was there. She experienced that. And for Gil-galad and Elrond to discount, sort of her experience all through the first stage, I think is a major mistake on their part. But I
Oh
love how
yeah.
you're saying that she is just sort of this broken, traumatized person just trying to struggle through Middle Earth.
Also, she should be the dang queen of the elves. Okay, Gil-galad
Right.
is in line for the throne. He was in that family. Her uncle's
Hmm.
family is really like they're the kings really and the queens. All right, so she's the youngest child in like the second brother, third brother. I can't. I'm
Yep.
spacing it right
The
now.
youngest child of the youngest brother. Yeah.
It's like, and she's Tolkien wrote that she is the most powerful and greatest elf ever, except for Fëanor. So she's far above Gil-galad and Elrond and Glorfindel and Círdan and every other elf that you've heard of. Okay, Thranduil, Legolas. She is above all of them. She's not the queen. She's not in charge. She's got to
Hmm.
listen to this young pup Elrond, who she probably changed some of his diapers. No, she probably didn't. Maybe, who knows?
Who knows?
Gil-galad was a baby. He was a baby. She could have definitely changed his
Yep.
diapers. Okay.
Yep.
And yet they're not listening to her. And what power does Galadriel have? She can see the future. She
Yes. Yeah.
knows what's going down. Her brother Finrod, who we saw in the Rings of Power, he was the
Hmm.
dead elf with the claw mark on his arm, and then Sauron's map of middle of Mordor. Go to Mordor.
Yeah.
Like, can you imagine being her? You're the smartest, wisest, oldest, except for Círdan, elf in Middle Earth, and you're relegated to what? So you can
Right.
canonically fight about her role in the Second Age because Tolkien didn't write it down. He started to kind of write it down, but she
Hmm.
never really attained this like power in the Second Age where we would have said, "Oh, that's BS that Gil-galad's telling her what to do." But I would hazard a guess right now, 5 episodes into the show, that Sauron has already influenced Gil-galad, and he tried to get rid of her by sending her to the west, by sending her to Valinor, the Blessed Realm, on the ship, because he knew he had to get rid of her.
Yeah.
I think Sauron's already working on the Elf Council. Remember the line, only elf lords can be present, Lord
Right.
Elrond.
Elf lords
Oh,
only.
come
Hmm.
on. He's the original elf lord. He's a
Yeah.
royal family. Elrond is
Right.
in the royal family. He's half elven. Okay.
Yeah, and
So
I wondered if when she says that line, she to me, at my ears at least, I hear she says "elf lords only," like emphasis on elf, as in Elrond. Sorry, you're half elven, right?
right.
Your dad's just the lowly Eärendil, right? Who went and convinced the Valar to overcome Morgoth, but you can't come to the council.
Yeah, that to me was like, you know what? Anatar, the Lord of Gifts, aka Sauron, is there. Maybe he's there. Maybe
Right.
he's influencing them. I don't know. I could be wrong on that, but I think there's more to it. And when we look back, there's going to be all these foreshadowings that we weren't
Right.
sure about. Anyway, Galadriel, I think it's all going to be fine. If you're worried about Galadriel on the show, I think it's all going to work out. I think Morfydd Clark is amazing. She's powerful. She's strong.
Yes. Hmm.
She's going to carry this torch that we want her to carry and become the Lady Galadriel that a lot of us imagined.
Let's back up a little bit from Galadriel and talk about the Rings of Power show as a whole. It's received a lot of criticisms, and yet I've also heard a lot of really good things, right? And I've got my good and my bad things about it as well. What do you feel like the showrunners are getting right with Rings of Power, and what do you feel they're getting wrong with Rings of Power as a whole?
I mean, the one big knock I've already mentioned is just Galadriel just being a little bit too unlikable. Aside from that, I think they're doing a fantastic job. This is Middle Earth. Like this is totally Middle Earth. This is Tolkien. This is how Tolkien tells stories. They don't have the rights to the Silmarillion or the First Age, so they have to
Right.
they have to do a few things. And
I dance around that a bit.
yeah, they got to dance around it. And it would be boring if Galadriel is sitting there in a beautiful elven grove and they're like, "Okay, we want you to go into the west and,
Right.
leave Middle Earth." And she's like, "Nah, I'm, I'm going to just stay here for like 6,000 more years. Like, I'm cool." Like, that's
Hmm.
boring. So, they're creating these pretty exciting, interesting scenes. I mean, when she was on the ship going to Valinor, standing at the front of the ship, I was like, what the
Yeah.
hell? Like,
Yeah.
no. And then she jumps off the ship. I mean, that was surprising. And she touched the darkness. She jumped into the water. She's
Hmm.
I think they're doing a lot of really, really good things. We can quibble with whatever. This is not a book. This is not literature. This is a series on this is a TV show, but it's not even a TV show. This is something we've never seen before. This budget with 50 hours. How many 50-hour movies have you ever seen? Zero.
Yeah,
There are
absolutely none,
no
right?
50-hour movies.
Even extended edition of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings all together. What is that? I don't know, 25,
We
30 hours maybe?
we got 12 and a half, close to 13 hours for Lord of the Rings. I don't know what the Hobbit extended editions add up to. But that's still, I mean, it's nowhere even near. 12 hours is
Yep.
nothing close
Yep.
to 20, to 50 hours. So they're doing what good writers do. And I think they're very good writers. And if you want to quibble, that's fine. We all have our own opinions. It's totally cool. As a writer myself, who understands character development, what they're doing in season one is called character development. You
Hmm.
know, when the character in the beginning of the movie just dies immediately and you don't know who they are, you could care less.
Right.
You don't
Right.
know you don't know them. You don't know their backstory. What you want is to characterize them in such a way that when really horrible things happen to them later, you care about them. So the writers are showing us Galadriel and Halbrand and the people of Numenor, and they're showing us who they are as people. We have to choose how we're going to be. Queen Muriel said. Now the Harfoots too. This is, I think a lot of people are up in arms about the Harfoots. I think it's amazing. Do I
Yeah.
hate that Sadok and company are like going to take the wheels off their
Yeah.
cart and leave them
Leave them
behind?
behind. Yeah.
That's cruel, but
That's pretty harsh. Yeah.
I mean, let's imagine society 3,000, 5,000, 10,000 years ago. I
Hmm.
mean, it was pretty rough to
Right.
survive. You had to leave some people behind to survive. You probably
Hmm.
did. And the little tiny Harfoots, I mean, I'm not gonna go overboard and say that it's a terrible idea to do that. Why not? Sure. It's drama, it's exciting. And look at who we're getting. Poppy and
Hmm.
Nori, they're amazing. I
Yeah.
mean, get off my lawn if you don't think they're not amazing characters. Those are amazing characters. That's female Frodo and Sam right there, all the
Right.
way to Mount Doom. Okay.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
love them. I think it's brilliant. And we're getting to see these primitive hobbits, Harfoots, and it's magic. It's magic. I love it.
Yeah.
Southlands, pretty interesting stuff going on there too. It's not There's not any sources on that, right?
Hmm.
Arendir, again, I'm sorry. If you don't think Arendir is not the most elf you've ever seen, also get off my lawn. He's
Yeah.
he's crying when he's got to cut down a tree.
Hmm. Right.
This is
Yep.
Tolkien. This is perfect Tolkien. The writers of the show know Tolkien better. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say 90% of the yokels posting on YouTube and Facebook and whatever. Okay, the writers know Tolkien and Middle Earth better than I do, better than most everybody does. So yeah, we're gonna not love every little choice that they make, but I got to tell you, we're seeing Tolkien, and I'm not going to mention the stranger yet until you bring it up
Yes. Oh,
in
we'll get to
detail.
the stranger in just a second. In just a second. But I love what you're saying. You're kind of walking through sort of each of those races. And one of the things that I thought was just really fascinating was we're seeing these races in the second age of Middle Earth. We're so used to seeing them in the third age of Middle Earth. Well, how are these races portrayed in the third age? Well, we see dwarves who have fallen from their pinnacle, right? Khazad-dûm was their pinnacle, and now they're fallen. We've seen men, Numenor was their pinnacle, and now that they've fallen. Elves are just on this slow dwindling decline, ever since the first age. But the hobbits are sitting pretty, they're in the Shire, they're comfortable, they're fat and lazy. They won't go on an adventure without their handkerchiefs, right? But what the Rings of Power has done is it's sort of flipped everything. It's flipped the script, right? No longer are hobbits, sitting by the hearth in their cozy Shire hobbit holes. They're out wandering the world and they're afraid of everything. Anything can kill you, right? As Nori said to the stranger, right? Anything can kill you. The dwarves, no, these are not the dwarves who are trying to reclaim, their home. These are the dwarves at the pinnacle of their power, right? Discovering Mithril. Khazad-dûm is the gem of the dwarven kingdoms. Numenor is the pinnacle. Elves are still there, right? There's more elves there than there were in the Third Age. So it's this really fantastic inverse of what we're seeing, even among the orcs, right? We see the orcs in the Third Age. We have the powerful Urukai, right, who can run in the sun, and they don't even take breaks. But now we've got orcs in the Second Age in Rings of Power who we can't be out in the sun. We have to build these tunnels. We're sort of scattered, divided, leaderless, if I may say so. And it's just that inverse. I think it's just really been a fantastic. It's just kind of blown my mind seeing how all of these races are just different in the Second Age than what they are in the Third Age.
I love that. Yeah, it's totally flipping the script and showing where they were and where they're going to go. And about the dwarves, you recall from the Rings of Power panel at FanX 2022, all of us panelists said the dwarves were the coolest thing about the show.
Yeah.
I'm this huge fan of dwarves in my Iron Dragon series. It's like dwarves are some of the main characters. I love dwarves like so much. This everything with Prince Durin and Khazad-dûm, and I love it. It's the best. And one of the moderator for our panel, basically said, we, instead of the dwarves being just burp and fart jokes or whatever, they've become this cool nuanced race like Tolkien wrote in Fellowship of the Ring. Peter Jackson, I love Peter Jackson. Fellowship is my favorite movie of all time. The original Lord of the Rings trilogy, I think, is the greatest fantasy trilogy of all time. It's the most awarded film franchise in history. Return of the Kings won more awards than anything else. So they're truly great movies. And Peter Jackson, he's the man. He had 4 years to prep and it showed.
Yep.
But he did make Gimli kind of just the comic relief. Well, Rings of Power has taken that back. Like they're not comic relief. They're an amazing, deep, I didn't mean to make a pun, but super cool race that should be admired, and we are finally getting to see it. And Disa, she's great, and she does have stubble on her chin, even if you
just a little bit. You gotta look close. Yeah. yeah. And I love that you say, these dwarves, how they're being portrayed. They're kind of giving their due attention as needed. As a complicated race. You see them in the First Age in the Silmarillion. For those who've read that or listened to this podcast, and they're really complicated. And when you read some of the passages of Gimli speaking in the Lord of the Rings books, it's like, whoa, like this is a talented, gentlemanly orator. Like Gimli, just some of the things he says, how he describes the glittering caves at Helm's Deep, and how he talks about Galadriel and her hair. It's just like, wow, this is a very articulate, very soft, tender dwarf, right? That we just, I love that we're seeing them portrayed in a more nuanced way in Rings of Power. And speaking of the dwarves, you brought up an interesting theory about the double Durins, right? There's been some criticisms thrown out there around there. I'd love to hear your theory. Now, keep in mind, listeners, we've only seen 5 episodes of Rings of Power so far, so we don't know what's coming in 6, 7, or 8 or in the future. But Paul, I'd love to hear, again, your theory on the double Durins. We're not done yet. If you like this episode, please leave a review and share with your friends. And remember to subscribe if you haven't already. We'll be right back.
Do you ever find yourself thinking about who would win in a fight between Goku and Superman? Hi, I'm James Gavsey, and on the Who Would Win show, me and my co-host Ray ignore anything important happening in the outside world and debate fictional battles between characters from comics, movies, and video games.
We got a new show every week, and almost always am I the winner.
Yeah, not true, Ray.
In the past, we've discussed such matches as Captain America versus Darth Vader, Solid Snake versus the Iron Giant, classic matchups like RoboCop versus Terminator, and even the Muppets versus Sesame Street.
That one was crazy. So if you're a fan of geek culture and love a spirited debate, check out the Who Would Win show wherever you get your podcasts, or check us out at whowouldwinshow.com.
In Dwarven lore, it's said that the first dwarf who awoke was Durin the First, and he was the kind of the father of their race, basically. When he passed away, he reincarnates back into another dwarf, and there's never 2 Durins alive at the same time. So a dwarf is born, and then eventually they realize that they're a Durin, that they've come back, that Durin the First has come back, or Durin the Second, whatever. It's never exactly detailed what that means. It's just they're reincarnated. The word reincarnation is used, and that they can communicate with the past Durins. So what the showrunners have done, I think, is they're showing us the movie The Sixth Sense, where Prince Durin goes and talks to his father, who is dead, who has long been dead. Rewatch the first few episodes. There's never any interaction with other dwarfs. He's alone with him in some room. The one scene with the throne, it's really creepy. They never really look at each other. And it's the most tender, cool scene. And do you remember the speech that Elrond gives him when he's talking about, oh, I talked to my father and he's so hard-headed or whatever.
Right.
And then Elrond is like, look, my dad like convinced the gods to come and save the world. And every day I just wish that I could talk to him. So count your blessings that you can talk to your father. And he kind of gives him the look. Elrond is saying that your father's dead, my father's dead, but you can talk to yours. And I wish I could talk to mine. Mm-hmm. And I think we're going to see that revealed later in this season. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah. We touched on this before. Who is the stranger?
Well, the stranger is a fascinating character, and I have a theory that we may never know the name of the stranger in this entire 50-hour show. And it's possible that there will be a reveal, but I wouldn't put it past the showrunners to just leave that mystery hanging out there. But I will say this: there is a Maiar spirit who lives in Valinor, and he is called Olorin. And Olorin is a fire spirit similar to Sauron, who's also a fire spirit. And this fire spirit, Olorin, moved among the elves in Valinor without them knowing for a long time. That's canon. So they didn't know that he was there. And then in the third age, Olorin, Radagast, I'm not using his name, I can't think of his name right now, but the three wizards we know, Saruman, Gandalf, and Radagast, show up in Middle-earth in the third age. And Olorin eventually is called Gandalf and Mithrandir and whatever else, the Grey Pilgrim. But he moved amongst the elves unknowns to them. I think that's it's a sentence like that. I think it's Gandalf. Gandalf has come. The gods sent him. They sent him at a very critical moment in time. And guess what? It's canon that the man in the moon came down and hung out with the hobbits. Frodo sings the song about the man in the moon. I think this is the man in the moon. In episode 5 of Rings of Power, there's a scene where Eleanor, Nori, looks out, and there he is, the stranger dressed in gray, looking up at the moon, and she thinks, oh, he's from the moon. Yeah. He's the man in the moon.
The camera pans up and focuses right there on the moon before it goes to his crater. Yeah.
There's all the other little hints that it's Gandalf. And gosh, wouldn't it be great if it was? I mean, let's just think about, okay, so fandom's losing their minds for whatever reason that it could be Gandalf because he's not there. Tolkien never said he wasn't there.
Yep.
He never said he wasn't there.
It's true. Yeah.
We have almost nothing for the Second Age. Would it not be amazing if this is where Gandalf fell in love with the hobbits?
Yeah.
And I think it's him.
That was one of the earliest theories. People were just kind of throwing stuff out. I actually personally, I haven't quite bought into any one of the half a dozen or so theories that I've heard out there. But I'm beginning more and more to think, maybe this is Gandalf. That's the one theory that I'm starting to lean more towards a little bit. But just to be clear, on this podcast, we talked a little bit about the creation of the moon from, was it the leaf or the fruit of Telperion, the silver tree that was in Valinor, and one of the male Maiar spirits was sort of chosen to pilot the moon. Are you saying that the man in the moon is Gandalf, is Olorin, or are you seeing two distinct beings there? That the man in the moon was this other Maiar? I can't remember his name.
So basically in Fellowship of the Ring, Frodo sings a song about the man in the moon. That's all I'm talking about. There's an old Hobbit legend about the man in the moon who came down. And I think this is what we're seeing. And I think that the showrunners who know the lore and know Middle Earth better than you or I or 99% probably 5% of the people out there thought, wouldn't that be cool if we explored this man in the moon idea? And it was like, if it's a man in the moon, he comes down, how would he come down? Well, he's a falling star. Oh, he's a meteor. I mean, I'm just sitting in the writer's room with them 5 years ago in my mind, thinking how they would have come up with this. And they're thinking, what characters can we get into this show that are going to be amazing? What if we had Gandalf with the first hobbits? That would be amazing. We're setting up why Gandalf just keeps coming back. The gods know that Frodo and Sam are going to take the ring to Mordor. So they know this. They knew this for a long time ago. God, Eru Ilúvatar, knows this. Okay, so the Valar know it. So guess what? The Harfoots need to survive.
Yes.
Nori
they gotta
and
make it through.
Poppy, they need to make it. Gandalf fights off some wargs and saves the Harfoot race. Okay, Nori and Poppy probably have children someday, and maybe they become Sam and Frodo's lines, you know?
Right.
That's where I'm at. Gandalf is sent there, and Nori says it. This was meant to be. Like, I was meant to find him. I know I was. Like, the gods are just lining all this up. The gods lined up Galadriel and Halbrand and Numenor. This is the gods trying to influence Middle Earth in their own way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know Gandalf is fond of saying, right, a chance meeting, right? And there's some fun definitions of how Gandalf is using the word chance, right? But it's almost like, yeah, there is a good power, there is a good will at work here, who's sort of orchestrating these good characters and helping them to progress forward. Paul, this has been a wonderful conversation. I have one final question for you, and we touched on this a little bit earlier, but the showrunners are relatively unknown, right? Or at least they've just been uncredited, right? Because of different movie rules and that sort of thing. And you did mention that you've met one of them. Tell us a little bit about why you trust the showrunners.
Okay, here's the deal. So J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay, they're a writing team. They met a long time ago and have been really, really good friends. And they went out to Hollywood to try to make it. And generally, people like them work in writers' rooms. And you can only credit, 2 or 3 writers. There's 10 people in the writers' room. They worked on all of these projects. They worked on some Star Trek projects. The first thing that they did was this script called Goliath, and it was amazing. And everybody was buzzing about it in Hollywood. It hasn't been made yet. I bet you it gets made someday if they're still into it, But point is, they made a name for themselves. And then big time people, maybe you've heard of J.J. Abrams.
Yep, just a little bit.
J.J. Abrams loved them, thought they were amazing, and had them working on some of his projects. So yeah, their name's not out there in lights, but they've worked on a whole bunch of projects behind the scenes and proved that they were really good. Now, running a show like this, that's a bit of a stretch, but they have producer help, they have other help. But Amazon asked for pitches. Okay, they asked for pitches, and everybody who had an inclination pitched. J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay had the best pitch and had the best knowledge of Middle Earth and Lord of the Rings out of anyone in Hollywood. They talked to everybody, okay? Their ideas for the show were better than everybody else's. And I think we're going to see that as the season progresses, that they have something there. So they're very honorable people. They do not have a giant track record, but we needed somebody like them to do this show who's going to dedicate their entire life to this show for years. This has been going on.
Right. Yes.
Okay. You can't get Peter Jackson to put this kind of effort in at this stage of the game. I don't think he's been there, done that. He's burned, he's worked the 120-hour weeks.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And we've seen his vision already. Yep.
We have, and they're nodding to his vision. I haven't met Patrick McKay, but after meeting JD and interacting with, people close to him, I think that we're in good hands. And yeah, they haven't silenced all the doubters yet, but we're like 5 hours in. Okay, we're
Yep.
5 hours in, and we've got some amazing characters, some amazing performances, some brilliant actors. The fact that they cast these actors shows that they know what they're doing. The Tolkien estate has veto power over a lot. That the Tolkien estate said you will not deviate from these major events in the Second Age, and they're not going to.
Right.
So I have faith, and I'm a writer. I see what they're doing. I can quibble with a few things, but overall, I think they're doing a great job. And can't we just enjoy anymore?
Yeah, absolutely. Just enjoy and not criticize.
Do we have to pee in our own Cheerios? Do we have to?
Yeah, exactly.
We have to eat it. Don't pee in it. Let's just try to have
just
a little
enjoy
bit of an open mind and maybe realize that there are people who know more about Middle Earth and Lord of the Rings than you do. And before you slam it, maybe you should do a little research. But God, I want to invite everybody who hasn't, really gotten into the lore, go out there and read some stuff. Read the Wikipedia, read the Tolkien Gateway stuff.
Yeah.
It's very accessible. You don't have to read the Silmarillion. Read some of the wiki sites and you'll be like, oh, wow, that was kind of in the show. You're going to realize the connections.
Paul, thank you for that. I know my own journey with Rings of Power has been a bit of a roller coaster, but I try to take the attitude that Sam, as he's portrayed in I think it's, I don't know, the Two Towers, right? That when the sun shines, it will shine out the clear. And I'm like, I have faith, I have hope in these showrunners that what they're doing is going to be genius. And I mean, I love Tolkien's world, so I'm going to enjoy Rings of Power and try to hold whatever criticism I have until sort of I've seen the end of their vision at least, and see, are those criticisms, are they legit or was I wrong? And I just need to trust the showrunners all along. My friends, if you enjoyed this episode, let me know by subscribing, leaving a review, and sharing with your friends. Follow me on Facebook or Instagram at Lore of the Rings Podcast. For feedback on the show, please email me using the link in the show notes. Until next Thursday, remember, not all those who wander are lost.